This is Luke Paulson, the Catholic Conservative, and welcome to the news of the week for May 3rd, 2025. And if you enjoy these videos, do not forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more. AI factory jobs. The following video was posted to TikTok mocking tariffs. Now, while I'm sure that you have seen this video already, I still want to talk about it, and this is my channel, so I get to do whatever I want. Communist countries like China have a great deal of trouble innovating because independent thought is discouraged. As a result, they just steal intellectual property. The main point of the video is that Americans enjoy all of these cheap products, and if they want to keep enjoying them, they will need to make them by the same standards. The problem is that American technology makes things even better. Love it or hate it, AI or artificial intelligence is here to stay. As a result, this AI revolution is already starting to replace several factory jobs. Not only is this creative destruction which will improve the standard of living around the country, it allows for products to be produced cheaply and efficiently. As such, Americans can still get cheap products that are made in America, as opposed to China. And since they are our enemy, it is unwise to rely on them for any product. Speaking of our enemies, we also have several of those right here in America. Judges support illegals. Remember when the illegals were sent to Martha's Vineyard and the tolerant liberals sent them away?
Pepperidge Farm remembers.
With all of these millions of illegals crossing into America, why did liberals not open their homes to them? They were willing to let them milk government programs without paying the proper taxes, but did not open their homes. Have these liberals never read the parable of the sheep and the goats? Maybe they would not house them because they knew that this was illegal. They just needed them as pawns to shift the electorate and ensure a Democrat victory. Now we have Judge Cano and his wife of New Mexico allegedly harboring illegals. I wonder if Attorney General Pam Bondi can still arrest Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for trying to help the illegals avoid deportation. If she is arrested for this crime, the fake news would spin it as if President Donald Trump was targeting his enemies. But to do that, they would need to prove that he ordered it. And Bondi is doing her job without having to be micromanaged. In addition to these criminal judges, we have a few enemies in the Pentagon. Resisting rather than quitting. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has had a lot of bad publicity after accidentally putting information on Signal. Granted, I am still not convinced that all of that information was not fabricated by the reporter, just as I think these new leaks are. However, I cannot prove that one way or another. Moving on, we have another undercover report from James O'Keefe. A branch chief at the Department of Defense has vowed to resist Hegseth and President Trump. When asked what he would be resisting, Branch Chief Nicholas Terza admitted that he would be resisting everything. Why these government officials cannot just quit so that they can be replaced with someone who wants to make America great again?
The world may never know.
They must truly think that they are the resistance. After all, everyone knows that when the media and the deep state are behind you, you are a part of the resistance. While James O'Keefe and his team work in the shadows to expose secrets, there are many things that certain people want to keep secret. Do not fear the Real ID. The Real ID Act is in the news again. This law was enacted all the way back in 2005, but these Real IDs are now required as of May of this year to board certain domestic flights and enter certain federal facilities. For those of you in Texas, just look for the gold star in the upper right corner to confirm that you have this ID. Naturally, with any new government identification and communication, we should be scared.
According to my research,
the Real ID operates to consolidate information between law enforcement agencies to make their job easier. However, it seems to me that there might be something more here. Something that should make actual Americans happy. It may be that the only states that have trouble with this are so-called sanctuaries for illegals, where they give the illegals everything, including a driver's license, as a reward for existing. Then again, I may be completely wrong on that. After all, I'm just some guy who makes political videos on YouTube. Let us move on from something that is not so dangerous to what was an avoidable tragedy. The woman crashed the helicopter. On January 29th, 2025, a Black Hawk helicopter collided with an American Airlines flight over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C. At the time, there were a lot of guesses about what happened. Liberals claimed that it was a terrible accident, whereas conservatives claimed that it was a DEI pilot. Now, after 3 months, we finally have an answer. The female pilot did not follow the instructions from her male co-pilot just before the crash. In other words, this could have been avoided if she had just listened. People where I am were scared of flying for weeks after the crash. However, although preventable, this was still a statistically improbable event. Speaking of improbable events, let us talk about an impossible scenario. Climate change. UK blocks the sun. There are a lot of things that we know about our very complicated biosphere, but also a lot of things that we do not know. One thing that we do know is that plants grow faster with more CO2 in their environment. It is one more reason that greenhouses are pumped full of it. The good Lord designed all of the ecosystems on Earth to work together, and promised that as long as the Earth endured, seed time and harvest would not cease. Apparently the United Kingdom is a little late on getting that memo. They want to pump something into the air to block sunlight to mitigate the effects of global warming. Global warming, something that will kill us all even if the models have never come to fruition, and never will. There are multiple problems with this, not the least of which is that these scientists have no idea what they are doing, and there is no undo button. Then there are all of the other nations around the world that will have to deal with it. Supposedly there will also be metals in the mixture, which could not possibly backfire. You see, this is what happens when you take observable science out of schools and replace it with political ideology. Which books are in schools? In some ways, school boards are learning. In Montgomery County, Maryland, the school board allowed parents to opt out of sexually explicit reading material. The only problem is that there were so many opt-out requests that from what I understand, the opt-out requests are now being ignored. Officially, it is a logistical nightmare to have to accommodate all of the requests. But instead of just not having the sexually explicit materials, the school board mandated them. Now this case may go all the way to the Supreme Court. It is being framed as school boards or judges controlling the education of children. In reality, that is not the case. It is a question of whether the parents have control or not, and that is infinitely more important. Now let us stick to the topic of faith and talk about what happened at Pope Francis's funeral. President Trump's blue suit. Pope Francis was laid to rest this past Saturday. However, since President Trump went there to bid farewell to a fellow head of state, the fake news decided to make it all about him. From what I have heard, everyone was asked to wear black to the funeral. Now this photo on the right is supposed to showcase that President Trump ignored this order. However, if you look at this picture on the left, you see a different story. Depending on the light, I saw at least 4 people also wearing blue at the time. Something tells me that the media said that they were to wear black, but it was not an official order. We have seen the same thing throughout President Trump's tenure, whether it be the bust of Martin Luther King Jr. that the fake news said that he got rid of, or when he supposedly tried to kill koi fish. The fake news just loves to take photos out of context in order to spread their Trump derangement syndrome to the next person. Now, while liberals have imagined that President Trump is a dictator, those in China are protesting an actual dictator. Protesting in China, there is not a single autocrat in the history of humanity who worked to limit government power. Change my mind. If liberals truly think that President Trump is a fascist, they should look at a place like China. However, even in China, the people stand up to oppression. I honestly think that it is a multitude of factors. It could be that the people have finally reached a boiling point. However, I think that factories not paying their employees was the last straw. As you know, China is trying to take advantage of America by the use of tariffs. But instead of eliminating their tariffs, China keeps raising them. As a result, the factories cannot move their product and workers are unpaid. Recall that in autocracies, everything is controlled by the state. By protesting their bosses, they are protesting the state, and they know it. It will be very interesting to see what happens next. However, waiting is something that a lot of evil people cannot risk doing. As such, there is an update on another evil enterprise that got tired of waiting. Epstein victim offed. Virginia Giuffre is dead. Officially, it has been ruled as a suicide. And if you believe that, you are the single most idiotic person that I could possibly meet. Miss Giuffre was one of Epstein's victims, and after her freedom, advocated for other survivors. All of the survivors know that she was offed. As such, this was a warning shot to keep any of them from talking. That way, all of the dirty secrets of the traffickers stay hidden. None of the clients want that list to come out. And we see what happens to those who speak up, or are brought to court. Now let us talk about some people who may or may not be on that list, or are at least covering for those who are. The media has turned. The fake news covered for Joe Biden throughout his supposed presidency. They called him sharp and mentally focused. They also called him the best version of Biden. Now that members of his staff are writing books about his mental decline, the media is free to talk about it. However, instead of apologizing for all of their lies and misinformation, they are blaming Democrats for misleading them. I know that these outlets are members of Operation Mockingbird. Operation Mockingbird is here to remind you to never question the official narrative. But they do bear some responsibility for producing the segments and intentionally covering up said decline. Unless these media outlets were literally given talking points and forbidden from talking about it. That almost sounds like Operation Mockingbird to a T. But I was told that it was just a conspiracy by the same people who said that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian misinformation, that the China virus did not come from a lab, and that Joe Biden was as sharp as a tack. However, the media holds no punches about President Trump and his cabinet, despite the amazing work that they have done. New drugs and old policies. Any week that I get to end one of these videos on good news is a good week in my book. Secretary of Health Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and United States Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins both made announcements that are not going to make certain people happy. First, let me tell you about RFK's announcement. The Department of Health will now be mandating placebo trials for all new vaccines. I am honestly shocked that this was not in place beforehand. It might have shown us some of the side effects that we are not allowed to talk about. Speaking of which, this could delay the new China virus boosters by months. And I do not care. Moving on to Secretary Rollins, she issued a memorandum to all state agencies that the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, benefits were only to go to Americans. Now this really should not be up for debate. If these people want welfare, they can come in legally. Whether or not these programs should even exist is another topic for another day. Either way, standing up for Americans is one more reason that liberals and the fake news despise President Trump and his cabinet. Maybe I'm just blowing smoke. Maybe I'm completely off my rocker, but that is just my opinion. And do not forget to like, comment, and most importantly, subscribe for more. But before you go, on the left I have last week's video, but you may also enjoy the video on the right.